Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to our first live streaming this Year of the Tiger 2022. This is author Liza and welcoming you to another episode of Learning with the reading of Chapter 2 for the Magic of Thinking Big. Once again, welcome to all, and immediately we have two in the audience live watching with us. Big thanks to Tita Wanderings and to the other angels watching, and those who will be watching the replay of this live streaming. This is another 1 hour of reading and learning together. So just interact in our chat box, greet each other, and of course, don't forget to connect with one another. Once again, good evening and welcome to our live stream. Sir Pretamal, good evening, sir. Happy New Year. Yes, Happy New Year too, Sir Pretamal. How are you po? Let me just enliven some of my angels as well. And Tita Wanderings, BG lang, good evening to everyone here. Sabi ni Tita Wanderings. Thank you so much, Tita Wanderings. Good evening to all. And let's see who else is with us. Just feel free to type in our chat box. Greetings to all. And let's see. Mega loud shout out sa lahat. Thank you so much, Sir Pratamon. Mega loud shout out din po. And enjoy, of course, our live streaming. Ayan. Sorry, hindi ko pa na-edit yung ating Hindi ko pa na-edit yung ating thumbs up done. Thank you so much. Mega loud shout out, Sir Pretamol. Kumusta po ang start ng ating year 2022? Okay, yung iba nasa gate pa. Tingnan naman natin yung iba. Okay. Yan. So, binuhay natin si Better You Journey Support. Nandyan din si Alice Gay. So, sila muna makakasama natin. We will be giving you support as we go on with our live stream. So, for a while lang po ha. Ay, check ko lang muna. And let's go to our channel and check our live stream. Okay. So I thought of going live tonight and read. Actually, last night pa sana to. However, I was quite busy. And this time, I would like to read to you a chapter from this magic of thinking big. And I think this is a good reminder for us as we start this new year, di ba? Having the right perspective. Yeah. Okay. And actually, I got some video projects in line also, and I'll really find time to work on this para yun yung next na upload natin. But for now, we'll have the reading of this. And I will not be showing my video for now. Just listen to the sharings or to the reading. And of course, I'll be reading your comments in our chat as well. Okay. The Magic of Thinking Big. The Magic of Thinking Big, Chapter 2. And this book is by David Schwartz, Ph.D. Chapter 2 is titled Cure Yourself of Excusitis, the Failure Disease. So, yan yung title nitong Chapter 2 of The Magic of Thinking Big. People, as you think yourself to success, that's what you will study. People. You will study people very carefully to discover, then apply success rewarding principles to your life, and you want to begin right away. Go deep into your study of people, and you'll discover unsuccessful people suffer from mind deadening thought disease. We call this disease excusitis. Let me just type in our chat, chapter 2, title Cure Yourself of Excusitis, the failure disease. Yeah. Cure yourself uh, of excusitis. So I'll pin that, and that's our title. I'll pin this message. Okay. By the way, for those who are watching with us, just feel free to greet or to shout out naman for me to read also your messages. And for those who want to join us, yung mga gusto din, baka may gusto na mag-share ng kanilang insights, feel free to do so. Thank you so much. And of course, I'll be thanking in advance those who will be watching the replay and those who will be supporting us throughout this live streaming. Feel free once again to interact through our comments and of course our live chat. Let's begin, or let's continue with this chapter 2, Cure Yourself of Excusitis, the Failure Disease. This is the second chapter, or chapter 2 of the book, The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz, Ph.D. People, as you think yourself to success, that's what you will study. People. You will study people very carefully to discover, then apply success rewarding principles to your life. And you want to begin right away. Go deep into your study of people, and you'll discover unsuccessful people suffer a deadening thought disease. We call this disease excusitis. Every failure has this disease in its advanced form, and the most average persons have at least a mild case of it. You will discover that excusitis explains the difference between the person who is going places and the fellow who is barely holding his own. You will find that the more successful the individual, the less inclined he is to make excuses. But the fellow who has gone nowhere and has no plans for getting anywhere always has a book full of reasons to explain why. Persons with mediocre accomplishments are quick to explain why they haven't, why they don't, why they can't, and why they aren't. Study the lives of successful people and you'll discover this. All the excuses made by mediocre fellow could be but aren't made by the successful person. I have never met nor heard a highly successful business executive, military officer, salesman, professional person, or leader in any field who could not have found one or more major excuses to hide behind. Roosevelt could have hidden behind his lifeless legs. Truman could have used no college education. Kennedy could have said, I'm too young to be president, and Johnson and Eisenhower could have ducked behind heart attacks. Like any disease, excusitis gets worse if it isn't treated properly. A victim of this thought disease goes through this mental process. I'm not doing well as I should. What else can I use as an alibi that will help me save face? Let's see. Poor health, lack of education, too old, too young, bad luck, personal misfortune, wife, the way my family brought me up. After the victim of this failure disease has selected a good excuse, he sticks with it. Then he relies on the excuse to explain to himself and others why he is not going forward. And each time the victim makes the excuse becomes embedded deeper in his subconsciousness. Thoughts of positive or negative grow stronger when fertilized with constant repetition. At first, the victim of excuses knows his alibi is more or less a lie. But the more frequently he repeats it, the more convinced he becomes that it is completely true, that the alibi is the real reason for his not being the success he should be. Procedure 1, then, in your individual program of thinking yourself to success, must be to vaccinate yourself against excusitis, the disease of the failures. And before we continue, let's greet those who are with us. Thank you so much. And mega loud shout out to the 4 million in the house watching with us. Kusena tuloy. Kusina ni Maels. Thank you so much. Hello, author, sabi niya. Hello then, Kusina ni Maels. Mega loud shout out. And of course, to Tita Wanderings and Preta Mall. By the way, feel free to drop your house or type author. Sa mga main po ang ginagamit nila, you just type author. And Nightboot will be the one to drop your house. Let's proceed. The 4 most common forms of excusitis. Excusitis appears in a wide variety of forms, but the worst types of this disease are health excusitis, intelligence excusitis, age excusitis, and luck excusitis. Now, let's see just how we can protect ourselves against these four common ailments. Number one, but my health isn't good. Health, sorry, health excusitis ranges all the way from chronic I don't feel good to the more specific I've got such and such wrong with me. Bad health, in a thousand different forms, is used as an excuse for failing to do what a person wants to do, failing to accept greater responsibilities, failing to make more money, failing to achieve success. Millions and millions of people suffer from health excusitis. But is it, in most cases, a legitimate excuse? Think for a moment of all the highly successful people you know who could, but who don't, use health as an excuse. My physician and surgeon friends tell me the perfect specimen of adult life is non-existent. There is something physically wrong with everybody. Many surrender in whole or in part to health excusitis, but success thinking people do not. Two experiences happened to me in one afternoon that illustrate the correct and incorrect attitudes toward health. I had just finished a talk in Cleveland. Afterwards, one fellow about 30 asked to speak to me privately for a few minutes. He complimented me on the meeting, but then said, I'm afraid your ideas don't or can't do me much good. You see, he continued, I've got a bad heart. I've got to hold myself in check. He went on to explain that he'd seen four doctors, but they couldn't find his trouble. He asked me what I would suggest he do. Well, I said, I know nothing about the heart, but as one layman to another, here are three things I'd do. First, I'd visit the finest heart specialist I could find and accept his diagnosis as final. You've already checked with four doctors and none of them has found anything peculiar with your heart. Let the fifth doctor be your final check. It may be very well, it may be very well. You've got a perfectly sound heart, but if you keep on worrying about it, eventually you may have a very serious heart ailment. Looking and looking and looking for an illness often actually produces illness. Second thing I'd recommend is that you read Dr. Schindler's great book, How to Live 365 Days a Year. Dr. Schindler shows in his book that out of every four hospital beds are occupied by people who have EII, emotionally induced illness. Imagine, three out of four people who are sick right now would be very well if they had learned how to handle their emotions. Read Dr. Chandler's book and develop your program for emotions management. Third, I'd resolved I'd resolved to live until I die. I went on to explain this troubled fellow some sound advice I received many years ago from a lawyer friend who had an arrested case of tuberculosis. This friend knew he would have to live a regulated life, but this hasn't stopped him from practicing law, rearing a fine family, and really enjoying life. My friend, who is now 78 years old, expresses his philosophy in these words: I am going to live until I die, and I'm not going to get life and death confused. While I'm on this earth, I'm going to live. Why only be half alive? Every minute a person spends worrying about dying is just 1 minute that fellow might be as well have been dead, I should say. I had to leave at that point because I had to be on a certain plane for Detroit. On the plane, the second but much more pleasant experience occurred. After the noise of the takeoff, I heard a ticking sound. Rather startled, I glanced at the fellow sitting beside me, for the sound seemed to be coming from him. He smiled a big smile and said, "Oh, it's not a bomb. It's just my heart." I was obviously surprised, so he proceeded to tell me what had happened. Just 21 days before, he had undergone a heart operation that involved putting a plastic valve into his heart. The ticking sound, he explained, would continue for several months until a tissue had grown over the artificial valve. I asked what he was going to do. "Oh," he said, "I've got big plans. I'm going to study law when I get back to Minnesota. Someday I hope to be in government work. The doctors tell me I must take it easy for a few months, but after that I'll be like new." There you have two ways of meeting health problems. The first fellow, not even sure he had anything organically wrong with him, was worried, depressed, on the road to defeat, wanting somebody to second his motion that he couldn't go forward. The second individual, after undergoing one of the most difficult of operations, was optimistic, eager to do something. The difference lay in how they thought toward health. I've got some I've had some very direct experience with health excusitis. I'm a diabetic. Right after I discovered I had this ailment about 5,000 hypodermics ago, I was warned. Diabetes is a physical condition, but the biggest damage results from having a negative attitude toward it. Worry about it and you may have real trouble. Naturally, since the discovery of my own diabetes, I've gotten to know many great other diabetics. They tell me about two extremes. One fellow who has a very mild case belongs to that fraternity of the living dead. Obsessed with the fear of the weather, he is ridiculously bundled up. He is afraid of infection, so he shuns anybody who has the slightest sniffle. He's afraid of overexertion, so he does almost nothing. He spends most of his mental energy worrying about what might happen. He bores other people telling them how awful his problem really is. His real ailment is not diabetes. Rather, he's a victim of health excusitis. He has pitied himself into being an invalid. The other extreme in the division is a division manager for a large publishing company. He has a severe case. He takes about 30 times as much insulin as the fellow mentioned above. But he is not living to be sick. He is living to enjoy his work and have fun. One day he said to me, "Sure, it's an inconvenience, but so is shaving. But I'm not going to think myself to bed. When I take those shots, I just praise the guys who have discovered insulin." A good friend of mine, a widely known college educator, came from Europe in 1945 minus one arm. Despite his handicap, John is always smiling, always helping others. He's about as optimistic as anyone I know. One day, he and I had a long talk about his handicap. "It's just an arm," he said. "Sure, two are better than one, but they just cut off my arm. My spirit is 100% intact. I'm really grateful for that." Another amputee friend is an excellent golfer. One day I asked him how he had been able to develop such a near perfect style with just one arm. I mentioned that most golfers with two arms couldn't or can't do nearly as well. He replies, says aloud, "Well, it's my experience," he said, "that the right attitude with one arm will beat the wrong attitude and two arms every time." I repeat, the right attitude and one arm will beat the wrong attitude and two arms every time. Think about that for a while. It holds true not only on the golf course but in every facet of life. Okay, so there you have the first description of the first excusitis, first common form of excusitis, and that is health excusitis. And before we continue with the four things that we can do to lick health excusitis, let's greet the 5 million in the house watching with us now. Sis Mimi Labrador. Tamsak Sis Liza. Thank you so much, Sis Mimi. Listening host, thank you so much for joining us and of course for listening. So, I'll just key in the first one that I have just read. Ano, yung first form natin ng excusitis. Ang sabi kasi ng author, excusitis or the sickness of always making excuses is actually the cause, the disease of failure, sabi niya. So number one is health excusitis. Thank you so much for the 5 million in the house watching with us now. Okay, let's continue. The four things you can do to leak health excusitis. The best vaccine against health excusitis consists of these four doses. Number one, refuse to talk about your health. Di ba? Parang kontra, no? But let's see how it goes. The more you talk about an ailment, even the common cold, the worse it seems to get. Talking about bad health is like putting fertilizers on weeds. Besides, talking about your health is a bad habit. It bores people. It makes one appear self centered and old maidish. Success minded people defeat the natural tendency to talk about their bad health. One may, and let me emphasize the word may, get a little sympathy, but one doesn't get respect and loyalty by being a chronic complainer. Number two, refuse to worry about your health. Dr. Walter Alvarez, emeritus consultant of the world famous Mayo Clinic, wrote recently, I always beg warriors to exercise some self control. For instance, when I saw this man, a fellow who was convinced he had a diseased gallbladder, although 8 separate X ray examinations showed that the organ was perfectly normal, I begged him to quit getting his gallbladder x rayed. I begged 100 of heart conscious men to quit getting electrocardiograms made. Number three, be genuinely grateful that your health is as good as it is. Meron palang ganong word, excusitis. Yes, sis Mimi, and that is from this book, The Magic of Thinking Big, coined by the author. Okay, let's continue. There's an old saying worth repeating often. I felt sorry for myself because I had ragged shoes until I met a man who had no feet. Instead of complaining about not feeling good, it's far better to be glad that you are as healthy as you are. Just being grateful for your health, for the health you have, is powerful vaccination against developing new aches and pains and real illness. Number four, remind yourself often it's better to wear out than rust out. Life is yours to enjoy. Don't waste it. Don't pass up living by thinking yourself into a hospital bed. There. It is better to wear out than rust out. So enjoy. Life is yours to enjoy, it says here. So number two. And number two is intelligence. Intelligence excuse. But I've got to have brains to succeed. To succeed. Intelligence excusitis or I lack brains is common. In fact, it's so common that perhaps as many as 95% of the people around us have it in varying degrees. Unlike most other types of excusitis, people suffering from this particular type of malady suffer in silence. Not many people will admit openly that they think they lack adequate intelligence. Rather, they feel it deep down inside. Most of us make two basic errors with respect to intelligence. Number one, we underestimate our own brain power. Number two, we overestimate the other fellow's brain power. There. Because of these errors, many people sell themselves short. They fail to tackle challenging situations because it takes a brain. But along comes the fellow who isn't concerned about intelligence and he gets the job. What really matters is not how much intelligence you have, but how you use what you do have. Once again, what really matters is not how much intelligence you have, but how you use what you do have. And I hope you got that, my dear friends. And nandito po yung mga kasama natin, si Mimi Labrador, like it. It's better to wear out than rust out. Yes, that's a quotable quote, di ba po? Hello Park TV, hello, mega mega loud shout out po. Ma'am Henupa, thank you so much for joining us. And ayan, nag-greet ka ni Mimi Labrador. Hello po at Henu Park TV. And to the 7 million in the house watching and listening to us right now, greetings to all and continue to interact through our chat box as I continue to read to you this chapter 2. Actually, this is what do you call that? This is an interesting and a very good reminder for us as we start our 2022, di ba? Kasi kung minsan, as we start the day or as we start at anything that we do, nasa utak natin yung papasok ng mga excuses, reasons why we should not do something or mga ganon. And according to the author, David Schwartz, ang sabi niya, this is a form of excusitis. Diba? It's a new term, relatively new term. So, ayan, thank you so much for tuning in, Ma'am Henupa and company. Okay, let's continue. The thinking that guides your intelligence is much more important than the quantity of your brain power. Let me repeat, for this is let me repeat, for this is vitally important. The thinking that guides your intelligence is much more important than how much intelligence you may have. In answering the question, should your child be a scientist? Dr. Edward Teller, one of the nation's foremost physicians, said, "A child does not need a lightning fast mind to be a scientist, nor does he need a miraculous memory, nor is it necessary that he get very high grades in school. The only point that counts is that the child have a high degree of interest in science." Interest, enthusiasm is the critical factor even in science. With a positive, optimistic, and cooperative attitude, a person with an IQ of 100 will earn more money, win more respect, and achieve more success than a negative, pessimistic, uncooperative individual with an IQ of 120. Just enough sense to stick with something, a chore, a task, project, until it's completed pays off much better than idle intelligence, even if idle intelligence be of genius caliber. For stickability, is 95% of ability. At a homecoming celebration last year, I met a college friend whom I have not seen for 10 years. Chuck was a very bright student and was graduated with honors. His goal when I last saw him was to own his own business in western Nebraska. I asked Chuck what kind of business he finally established. Well, he confessed, I didn't go to business for myself. I would have said to my I wouldn't have said this to anyone 5 years ago or even 1 year ago, but now I'm ready to talk about it. As I look back at my college education now, I see that I became an expert in why a business idea won't work. I learned every conceivable pitfall, every reason why a business will fail. You've got to have ample capital, be sure the business cycle is right, is there a big demand for what you will offer, is the local industry stabilized, 1,001 things to check out. The thing that hurts most is that several of my old high school friends who never seemed to have much on the ball and didn't even go to college are now very well established in their own businesses. But me, I'm just plodding along auditing freight shipments. Had I been drilled a little more in why a business can succeed, I'd be better off in every way today. The thinking that guided Chuck's intelligence was a lot more important than the amount of Chuck's intelligence. Why some brilliant people are failures. I've been close for many years to a person who qualifies as a genius. He has high abstract intelligence and is Phi Beta Kappa. Despite this very high native intelligence, he is one of the most unsuccessful people I know. He has a very mediocre job. He's afraid to take responsibility. He has never married, lots of marriages, and in divorce. He has a few friends because people bore him. He's never invested in property of any kind. He might lose his money. This man uses his great brain power to prove why things won't work rather than directing his mental power to searching for ways to succeed. Because of the negative thinking that guides this great reservoir of brains, this fellow contributes little and creates nothing. With a changed attitude, he could do great things indeed. He has the brains to be a tremendous success, but not the thought power. Another person I know well was inducted into the Army shortly after earning a Ph.D. degree from a leading New York university. How did he spend his 3 years in the Army? Not as an officer, not as a, not as a staff specialist. Instead, for 3 years, he drove a truck. Why? Because he was filled with negative attitudes toward fellow soldiers. I'm superior to them. Toward the army methods and procedures, they are stupid. Toward discipline, it's not for others, not me. It's for others, not me. Towards everything, including himself, I'm a fool for not figuring out a way to escape this rap. This fellow earned no respect from anyone. All his vast store of knowledge lay buried. His negative attitude turned him into a flunky. Remember, the thinking that guides your intelligence is much more important than how much intelligence you have. Not even a PhD degree can override this basic success principle. Several years ago, I became a close friend of Phil F., one of the senior officers of a major advertising company. Phil was director of research marketing for an agency and he was doing a bang up job. Was Phil a brain? Far from it. Phil knew nothing next about research technique. He knew next to nothing about statistics. He was not a college graduate, although the people working for him were. And Phil did not pretend to know the technical side of research. What then enabled Phil to command $30,000 a year while not one of his subordinates earned $10,000. This Phil was a human engineer. Phil was 100% positive. Phil could inspire others when they felt low. Phil was enthusiastic. He generated enthusiasm. He understood people, and because he could really see what made them tick, he liked them. Not Phil's brain, but how he managed those brains made him 3 times more valuable to his company than men who rated higher on the IQ scale. Out of every 1,000 persons who enroll in college, fewer than 50 will graduate. I was curious about this, so I asked a director admissions at a large university for his explanation. It's not insufficient intelligence, he said. We don't admit them if they don't have sufficient ability. And it's not money. Anyone who wants to support himself to college today can do so. The real reason is attitudes. You would be surprised, he said, how many young people live because they don't like their professors, the subject they must take, and their fellow students. The same reason, negative thinking explains why the door to top flight executive positions is closed to many young junior executives. Sour, negative, pessimistic, depreciating attitudes rather than insufficient intelligence hold back thousands of young executives. Thank you so much sa harang sis Mimi and Tita Wondering. So yan, you got it. Thank you so much. As one executive told me, it's a rare case when we pass up a young fellow because he lacked brains. Nearly always it's attitude. I was retained by an insurance company to learn why the top 25% of the agents were selling over to 75% of the insurance while the bottom 25% of the agents sold only 5% of the total volume. Thousands of personal files were carefully selected or checked. The search proved beyond any question that no significant difference existed in native intelligence. What's more, differences in education did not explain the difference in selling success. The difference in the very successful and the very unsuccessful finally reduced to the main differences in attitudes or difference in thought management. The top group worried less, was more enthusiastic, had a sincere liking for people. We can't do much to change the amount of native ability, but we can certainly change the way we use what we have. Knowledge is power when you use it constructively. Once again, knowledge is power when you use it constructively. Closely allied to intelligence excusitis is some incorrect thinking about knowledge. We often hear that knowledge is power, but this statement is only half truth. Knowledge is only potential power. Knowledge is power when put to use, then and only when the use made of it is constructive. The story is told of the great scientist Einstein who once asked how many feet are in a mile. Einstein's reply was, I don't know. Why should I fill my brain with facts when I can find in 2 minutes in any standard reference book? Einstein taught us a big lesson. He felt it was more important to use your mind to think than to use it as a warehouse for facts. One time, Henry Ford was involved in a libel suit with the Chicago Tribune. The Tribune had called Ford an ignoramus, and Ford said in effect, prove it. The Tribune asked him scores of simple questions such as who was Benedict Arnold, when was the Revolutionary War fought, and others, most of which Ford, who had little formal education, could not answer. Finally, he became quite exasperated and said, I don't know the answers to those questions, but I could find a man in 5 minutes who does. Henry Ford was never interested in miscellaneous information. He knew that every major executive He knew what every major executive knows, that the ability to know how to get information is more important than using the mind as a garage for facts. Tama. How much is a fact man worth? I spent a very interesting evening recently with a friend who is the president of a young but rapidly growing manufacturing concern. The TV set happened to be turned to one of the most popular quiz programs. The fellow being quizzed has been on the show for several weeks. He could answer questions on all sorts of subjects, many of which seemed nonsensical. After the fellow answered a particularly odd question, something about the mountain in Argentina, my host looked at me and said, "How much do you think I'd pay for that guy to work for me?" "How much?" I asked. "Not a cent, over 3,000 over $300, not per week, not per month, but for life." I've sized him up. The expert can't think. He can only memorize. He's just a human encyclopedia, and I can figure for a $300 I can buy a pretty good set of encyclopedias. In fact, maybe that's too much. 90% of what the guy knows I can find in a $2 almanac. Ouch. "What I want around me," he continued, "are people who can solve problems, who can think up ideas, people who can dream and then develop the dream into a practical application. An idea man can make money with me. A fact man can't." Three ways to cure intelligence excusitis. There are three easy ways to cure intelligence excusitis. Number one, never underestimate your own intelligence and never overestimate the intelligence of others. Don't sell yourself short. Concentrate on your assets. Discover your superior talents. Remember, it's not how many brains you've got that matters. Rather, it's how you use your brains that counts. Manage your brains instead of worrying about how much IQ you've got. And by the way, today, recently, we have what we call as the multiple intelligences, which means we don't only have the intelligence quotient as the ability to reason out, we have many different forms of intelligence. Okay? Let's go to the second cure for this intelligence excuse. Remind yourself several times daily, my attitudes are more important than my intelligence. At work and at home, practice positive attitudes. See the reasons why you can do it, not the reasons why you can't. Develop an I'm winning attitude. Put your intelligence to creative, positive use. Use it to find ways to win, not to prove you will lose. And number three, remember that the ability to think is of much greater value than the ability to memorize facts. Use your mind to create and develop ideas, to find new and better ways to do things. Ask yourself, am I using my mental ability to make history? Or am I using it merely to record history made by others? Diba? So those are the three ways to cure intelligence excusitis. Let me repeat that now. Number one, never underestimate your own intelligence and overestimate the intelligence of others. Number two, remind yourself, my attitudes are more important than my intelligence. And number three, remember that the ability to think is of much greater value than the ability to memorize facts. Yeah. So those are the three vaccines that we can use against this intelligence excuse. And let's see, no? Sabi ni Tita Wanderings, ayan, ganda ng book na yan, host. Yes po, Tita Wanderings. This is actually one of the best-selling self-help books. And I've listened to the audiobook of this, but I'd like to read it kasi mas may impact kasi pag inuulit mo yung isang book or isang idea. The more you read it, the more you get to internalize the concepts being discussed. Okay. Let's go to excuse number three. Let's go to number three, age excusitis. The it's no use, I'm too old or too young. The failure disease of never being the right age comes in two easily identifiable forms: the I'm too old variety or the I'm too young brand. You have heard hundreds of people of all ages explain their mediocre performance in life, sometimes like this: I'm too old or too young to break in now. I can't do what I want to do or I'm capable of doing because of my age handicap. Really, it's surprising how few people feel they are just right age wise. And it's unfortunate. This excuse has closed door for real opportunity to thousands of individuals. They think their age is wrong, so they don't even bother to try. I'm too old. The I'm too old variety is the most common form of age excusitis. This disease is spread in subtle ways. TV fiction is produced about the big executive who lost his job because of a merger and can't find another because he's too old. Mr. Executive looks for months to find another job, but he can't, and in the end, after contemplating suicide for a while, he decides to rationalize that it's nice to be on the shelf. Plays and magazines articles on the topic why you are washed up as at 40 are popular not because they represent true facts, but because they appeal to many worried minds looking for an excuse. How to handle age excusitis? Age excusitis can be cured. A few years ago, while I was conducting a sales training program, I discovered a good serum that both cures this disease and vaccinates you so you won't get in the first place. You won't get it in the first place. In the training program, there was a trainee named Cecil. Cecil, who was 40, wanted to shift over to set himself up as a manufacturer's representative, but he thought he was too old. After all, he explained, I'd have to start from scratch, and I'm too old for that now. I'm 40. I talked with Cecil several times about his old age problem. I used the old medicine. You are only as old as you feel, but I found I was getting nowhere. Too often, people retort with, but I do feel old. Finally, I developed a method that worked. One day after a training session, I tried it on Cecil. I said, Cecil, when does a man's productive life begin? He thought for a couple of seconds and answered, Oh, I guess when he's about 20. Okay, I said. Now, when does a man's productive life end? Cecil answered, Well, if he stays in good shape and likes his work, I guess a man is still pretty useful when he's 70 or so. All right, I said. A lot of folks are highly productive after they reach 70. But let's agree with what you've just said. A man's productive years stretch from 20 to 70. That's 50 years in between. I said, You're 40. How many years of productive life have you spent? 20, he answered. How many have you left? 30, he replied. In other words, Cecil, you haven't even reached the halfway point. You've used up 40% of your productive years. I looked at Cecil and realized he'd gotten the point. He was cured of age excusitis. Cecil saw he still had many opportunity filled years left. He switched from thinking I'm already old to I'm still young. Cecil now realized that how old we are is not important. It's one's attitude towards age that makes it a blessing or a barricade. Curing yourself of age excusitis often opens doors to opportunities that you thought were locked tight. A relative of mine spent years doing many things differently, or doing many different things, selling, operating his own business, working in a bank, but he never quite found what he really wanted to do the most. Finally, he concluded that the one thing he wanted more than anything in the world was to be a minister. But when he thought about it, he found he was too old. After all, he was 45, had three children, and little money. But fortunately, he mustered all of his strength and told himself, 45 or not, I'm going to be a minister. With tons of faith but little else, he enrolled in a 5 year ministerial training program in Wisconsin. 5 years later, he was ordained a minister and settled down with a fine congregation in Illinois. Old? Of course not. He still has 20 years of productive life ahead of him. I talked with this man not long ago, and he said to me, if I had not made the great decision when I was 45, I would have spent the rest of my life growing old and bitter. Now I feel every bit as young as I did 25 years ago. And he almost looked it too. With the lick, when you lick age excuses, the natural result is to gain the optimism of youth and fear of youth. When you beat down your fears of age limitations, you add years to your life as well as success. A former university college of I I'm sorry, a former university colleague of mine provides an interesting angle of how age excusitis was defeated. Bill was graduated from Harvard in the 1920s. After 20 years in the stock brokerage business, during which time he made a modest fortune, Bill decided he wanted to become a college professor. Bill's friend warned him that he would overtax himself in the rugged learning program ahead. But Bill was determined to reach his goal and enrolled in the University of Illinois at the age of 51. At 55, he had earned his degree. Today, Bill is the chairman of the Department of Economics at a fine liberal arts college. He's happy too. He smiles when he says, I've got almost a third of my good years left. Old age is a failure disease. Defeat it by refusing to let it hold you back. And just in time, no, for Sis Mimi, sabi niya, guilty ako sa age excuse, sis. I always say that I am already old. Now we know actually it's also a disease, di ba? Yung age excuse. Actually, nung when I reached yung 30 plus na yung age natin, with my colleagues, sometimes, we talk about this and sometimes we have this age excusitis as well. But I'm glad that I've read this book kasi it reminds me, that, oh, ang dami pala, no? Ang productive years natin is 20 to 70 years old. 'Di ba? So meaning to say we have 50 years in between, 'di ba? So what are we going to do about our productive years, 'di ba? Haha, turning 60 this May. Senior sis senior na. O nga, no? But pero 'di ba, after may mga senior na after they reach the age of 60, you will see that they have an even more productive life, 'di ba? So let's continue with this. When is a person too young? The I'm too young variety of age excusitis that does much damage too. About a year ago, a 23-year-old fellow named Jerry came to me with a problem. Jerry was a fine young man. He had been a paratrooper in the service and had gone to college. While going to college, Jerry supported his wife and son by selling for a large transfer and storage company. He had done a terrific job, both in college and for his company. But today Jerry was worried. Dr. Schwartz, he said, I've got a problem. My company has offered me the job of salesman. This would make me supervisor of over 8 salesmen. Congratulations, that's wonderful news, I said, but he seemed worried. Well, he continued, all 8 men I'm to supervise are from 7 from 7 to 21 years older than I. What do you think should I do? Can I handle it? Jerry, I said, the general manager of your company obviously thinks you're old enough or he wouldn't have offered you this job. Just remember these 3 points and everything will work just fine. First, don't be age conscious. Back on the farm, a, bo- a boy became a man when he proved he could do the work of a man. His number of birthdays had nothing to do with it, and this applies to you. When you prove you're able to handle the job of a sales manager, you're automatically old enough. Second, don't take advantage of your new gold bars. Show respect for the salesman. Ask them for their suggestions. Make them feel that they are working for a team captain, not a dictator. Do this and the man will work for you, not against you. Third, get used to having persons working for you. Leaders in all fields find that they are younger than many of the people they supervise. So get used to having older men work for you. It will help you a lot in the coming years when even bigger opportunities develop. And remember, Jerry, your age won't be a handicap until you make it one. Today, Jerry's doing fine. He loves the transportation business and he's now planning to organize his own company in a few years. Youth is a liability only when the youth thinks it's so. You can offer you can often hear that certain jobs require considerable physical maturity, jobs like selling securities and insurance, that you've got to have either gray hair or no hair at all in order to gain an investor's confidence is plain nonsense. What really matters is how well you know your job. It's if you know your job and understand people, you sufficiently are mature to handle it. Age has no real relation to ability unless you convince yourself that years alone will give you the stuff you need to make your mark. Many young people feel that they are being held back because of their youth. Now, it is true that another person in an organization who is insecure and job scared may try to block your way forward using age or some other reason. But the people who really count in the company will not. They will give you as much responsibility as they feel you can handle well. Demonstrate that you have the ability and positive attitude, and your youthfulness will be considered an advantage. In quick recap, the cure for age excuses is this. Number one, look at your present age positively. Think, I'm still young, not I'm already old. Practice looking forward to new horizons and gain enthusiasm and feel youth. Number two, compute how much productive time you have left. Remember, a person aged 30 still has 80% of his productive life ahead of him. A 50-year-old has still a big 40%, the best 40% of his opportunity years left. Life is longer than most people think. Number three, invest future time in doing what you really want to do. It's too late only when you let your mind go negative or think it's too late. Stop thinking, I should have started years ago. That's failure thinking. Instead, I'm going to start now. My best years are ahead of me. That's the way successful people think. And let's go now to number 4. Medyo mahaba-haba pala itong chapter na to. So, ang number four, excusitis, form of excusitis or the excuse disease is the bad luck excuse. But my case is different. I attract bad luck. Recently, I heard a traffic engineer discuss highway safety. He pointed out that upward of 40,000 persons are killed each year in so-called traffic accidents. The main point of his talk was that there is no such thing as a true accident. What we call an accident is the result of human or mechanical failure or a combination of both. While this traffic expert was saying substan uh, what this traffic expert was saying substantiates what wise men throughout the ages have said. There is a cause for everything. Nothing happens without a cause. There is nothing accidental about the weather outside today. It's not a result, it is the result of specific causes. And there is no there is no reason to believe that human affairs are an exemption. Yet, hardly a day passed that you do not hear someone blame his or her problems on bad luck. Encouraging host, nasa productive years pa pala ako. That's definitely correct po, sis Mimi Labrador. Yes, indeed, no? That's why sabi niya, we have to cure ourselves of this age because it's always the right time. With the right attitude, and of course, we are just in the right age, just as we are. Diba? Let's continue. And it's a rare day that you do not hear someone attribute another person's success to good luck. Let me illustrate how people succumb to luck excusitis. I launched recently with three junior executives the topic of conversation that day was George C., who just yesterday had been picked from among their group for a major promotion. Why did George get this position? These three fellows dug up all sorts of reasons. Luck, pull, bootlicking, George's wife and how he flattered the boss, everything but the truth. The facts were that George was simply better qualified. He had been doing a better job. He was working harder, and he had a more effective personality. I also knew that the senior officers in the company had spent much more time considering which one of the four would be promoted. My three disillusioned friends should have realized that the top executives don't select major executives by drawing names from a hat. I was talking about the seriousness of lack excusitis not long ago with the sales executive of a machine tool manufacturing company. He became excited about the problem and began to talk about his own experience with it. I have never heard it called that before, he said, but it is one of the most difficult problems every sales executive has to wrestle with. Just yesterday, a perfect example of what you are talking about happened in my company. One of my salesmen walked in about 4 o'clock with a $112,000 order for machine tools. Another salesman, whose volume was too low, his problem was at the office in that time. Hearing John tell the good news, he rather enviously congratulated him, and then said, "Well, John, you're lucky again." Now, what the weak salesman won't accept is that luck had nothing to do with John's big order. John had been working on that customer for months. He had talked repeatedly to a half dozen people out there. John stayed up nights figuring out exactly what was best for them. Then he got our engineers to make preliminary designs on the equipment. John wasn't lucky unless you can call carefully planned work and patiently executed plans luck. Suppose luck were used to reorganize General Motors. If luck determined who does what and who goes where, every business in the nation would fall apart. Assume for a moment that General Motors would be completely reorganized on the basis of luck. To carry out the reorganizations, the names of all employees would be placed in a barrel. The first name drawn would be the president, the second name, executive vice president, and so on down the line. Sounds stupid, doesn't it? Well, that's how luck would work. People who rise to the top in any occupation, I should say, business management, selling, law, engineering, acting, or what you have, get there because they have superior attitudes and use their good sense in applied hard work. Conquer your luck excusitis in two ways. Number one, accept the accept the law of cause and effect. I repeat, number one, accept the law of cause and effect. Take a look at what happens to be someone's good luck. You'll find that not luck, but preparation, planning, and success producing thinking preceded his good fortune. Take a second look at what appears to be someone's bad luck. Look, and you'll discover certain specific reasons. Mr. Success receives a setback, he learns and profits. But when Mr. Mediocre loses, he fails to learn. And number two, don't be a wishful thinker. Don't waste your mental muscles dreaming of an effortless way to win success. We don't become successful simply through luck. Success comes from doing those things and mastering those principles that produce success. Don't count on luck for promotions, victories, and the good things in life. Luck simply isn't designed to deliver the good things in life. Instead, just concentrate on developing those qualities in yourself that will make you a winner. Let me type that last line, no? Concentrate on developing those qualities. Oh, naka-caps lock pala. Let me erase that. Concentrate. So, this actually ends the chapter 2 of this book, The Magic of Thinking Big by Dr. David Schwartz, Ph.D. And my dear friends and those listeners, Tita Wandering, Sis Mimi Labrador, Ma'am Henu Park, Sister Pretamol, and all the others na nabaka-background kanina pa. Thank you all so much for listening. And I hope you learned something from our episode of reading tonight, and that is from the chapter 2 of this book, The Magic of Thinking Big. And my dear friends, no, this 2022, as we meet more opportunities and create even these opportunities for ourselves and loved ones, I hope that we cure ourselves of the four forms of excusitis. Ano ulit yung isa? Yung una, the first form of excuse is the health excuse, no? It's a reality that many of us that we are in the pandemic, and then of course yung health natin, it's really important, but I hope that we don't make it as an excuse to not work on what we should be doing. The second excuse is ito, yung second excuse na sinabi dito sa book is the age excuse, yung extremes na I'm too old or too young to do something. And it's a good reminder also for us that, we still have years that are, we are still within the productive years, and we are only as old as we think. Diba? So if we say, I'm already old, o diba talagang it will reflect, it will manifest in the way we conduct ourselves, of course. And I hope that we will always remember, we always maximize the age that we are right now, no? No matter how old we are in the right age, at the right age this time. Diba? And of course, the number three is yung intelligence excuse, 'di ba? Yung iba, yung sabi ng iba is they're not as intelligent as they should be in order to become successful. Pero sabi dito sa book, ang mas importante is how we use what we have. It's not actually our brain power, it's actually more on how we use our brains diba? To create something new or to find how to make things work for us and for others. That's what matters most. It's not the IQ, it's how we use it. And we also have to be reminded that intelligence comes in many different forms. We have what we call as the physical intelligence. May mga tao na more sila sa ang intelligence nila is sa paggawa ng mga bagay-bagay, more on manual things. May mga iba naman na meron tayong tinatawag na spatial intelligence, yung mga artists, yung mga yon, di ba? Meron din tayong tinatawag na musical intelligence, environmental intelligence, language, di ba? Actually, there are what we call as the multiple intelligences. So, um, actually, we have the brains, and we are reminded not to underestimate the brain power that we have. It's really important that we use our brain power, diba? So that's another reminder for us. And of course, the last reminder is the bad luck excuse. Diba, ang dami talaga, oh. Actually, last 2021, ang dami kong narinig din ng mga tao na pinakamalas daw ang kanilang 2021. Although some really na talagang there are many things in the past that we cannot control. But of course, there's always a reason for everything. And as the last line says, may we continue to concentrate instead of developing those qualities within ourselves that will make us a winner in life. And this 2022, I pray for all of us to become winners and, of course, to cure ourselves of this excusitis. At sana, ma, anong tawag doon, I cannot say it in Filipino. I hope we get to cure ourselves really of any form of excusitis because I believe that this is the right time. We are at the right age, at the right health, at the perfect health to do what it takes to make this 2022 our best life ever. And when we do that, it's not just for ourselves, but of course for our loved ones. And so, my dear friends, thank you all so much for tuning in. This has been author Liza Gay sharing with you this chapter 2. And in our next live streaming episodes, I will be reading with you other chapters of this book. And thank you all so much. And of course, we will also continue sharing insights and, of course, storytelling, supporting one another, and may we grow all together. Once again, thank you so much and have a great 2022 ahead of you. And may we always experience the magic of thinking big. So, thank you so much. Nandito din si Wondering 2. Harang muna, sabi ni Tita Wondering. Thank you so much sa paharang, Tita. And as I've said, by the next, hopefully, I will be able to edit or to finalize yung next project ko for this 2022. I actually have this project titled Design Your 2022. And my target is to be able to share with you the speech that I shared in Toastmasters, kung saan nag-share ako doon yung 3 steps on how to design your 2022. Okay, so with that, my dear friends, see you sa ating next live stream at saka sa ating next streaming or premieres ng ating mga videos this 2022. And I'm also excited for all of you to be able to create and make your dreams come true. Of course, we just need to cure ourselves of this excusitis, di ba? Kasi ang dami nating pwedeng excuse. But I hope that with this chapter that I've read to you, at least alam natin kung paano natin i-cure ang ating sarili from these excuses. So, good night, my dear friends, and I'll see you in our next episodes. And ganaho, sabi ni Tita Wanderings. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you next. Thank you all so much. All the best po and God bless. So bye everyone and I'll see you in our next premieres. Good night and goodbye.